Hello and welcome. This is going to be a short introduction to Uberball 2. I'm going to show you how I would go about creating a material from start to finish using the Uberball scene. So to begin with, I'm going to click on the white Uberball icon and I'm going to double click on the standard Uberball scene and load it into modo 11.2. So with the scene loaded, you should see the shader ball in your viewport and these three control locators. Now, if your viewport doesn't look like mine, make sure that it's set to show the render camera. Now, in order to use these control locators, you'll need to be in item mode. In fact, there's absolutely no reason to use any of the component modes in the Uberball scene. I would just stay in item mode the whole time. So when you click on any of the control locators in the scene, this is going to bring up the channel hall tool. And this is a special tool in Modo that essentially gives you access to any of the controls that are assigned to that particular locator. So the idea is that you make your changes by interacting with the controls that are brought up by each particular locator. And once you're finished, you need to drop the channel hall tool by either hitting the spacebar key or the escape key. So let's start by creating an actual shader so I can demonstrate the workflow of Uberball. So the first thing you should notice is that the Uberball scene has been loaded as a new untitled scene. The first thing I need to do is to save it to make sure that I don't lose any of my work. So I'm just going to give it a name and we're going to create a nickel material. So let's call this nickel and just save it somewhere on disk. Now, when working in Uberball, you should always do all of your shading inside of this ball material that's highlighted green. You can, of course, rename this material if you want, and I'm going to do this right now. So let's call this nickel. And that is going to reassign all the shaders in the scene. So when this dialog comes up, you do want to hit yes. Now, rather than selecting the material and adjusting the values to create a metal, I'm going to make use of one of my starter materials. So there's a starter materials folder highlighted in orange, and it's hidden, and you want to keep it hidden because it's not meant to be displayed. It's simply a folder in which I've stored a few useful starting points. So I'm going to grab the metal and I'm going to drag that into my nickel material. So as you can see, this is correctly set up to create a metal, meaning my diffuse amount is set to 0, my specular amount of my Fresnel is set to 100, and I've got a specular color defined, which is going to create a basic starting point for metal. Now, of course, I'm not just creating a generic metal, I want to create nickel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the specular color, and I'm going to set my browser mode to list. And I'm going to go to the metals folder, which comes as default with Modo. I'm going to scroll down until I find the nickel, which is here. And that's going to assign the physically correct value for nickel in my specular color field. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to add this to the GL override. So let me just grab this color and I'm just going to copy this value. And I'm going to tick GL override so that my metal doesn't show up black in the viewport. And I'm just going to paste that into this field so that the two colors match. And next I'm going to click the blue control locator just to make sure that my environment selection is set to 1, which is the neutral studio lighting one. With that done, let's launch preview and have a look at our results. So with preview updated, you can see that we've got a really good starting point for a very clean, physically correct nickel. However, it is a little bit too clean to be convincing. So in order to dirty it up and wear it up a bit, we're going to add some textures. Now, if you own Vispack products, there is a folder there called Useful Maps with a few textures that you can use as starting points. So I'm going to grab one of these, the Scratches one, and I'm going to drag it into my nickel material in my shader tree. I'm going to quickly expand this Scratches group to have a look inside. I can see there's a normal map and 3 other maps that are set to clear coat roughness. Now, clear coat roughness is something that you'd use on a plastic, but because this is a metal, I'm just going to change the effect from clear coat roughness to just regular roughness. And I'm checking that the blend mode is add so that the maps are just going to add on top of the existing roughness on the material. With that done, I'm going to collapse this Scratches group and I'm going to go back to my Useful Maps folder and I'm also going to grab the Roughness Variation map. And the idea behind this is just to add a little bit of variation to the roughness of the metal. So once again, this is set to add blending mode, and this just means that it modulates the existing roughness on the material itself. So I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to increase the foreground value, and that just means that the roughness variation is going to be slightly exaggerated. And I'm just going to go to the texture locator and I'm going to increase the size to 0.25, 250 millimeters in each axis. So with that done, now would be a good time to launch a preview. So I'm going to expand the preview to fill the screen and start it off and let it cook for a while. So now that preview's had a chance to clear up, I can see that my scratches are way too strong. So I've selected the normal map, and what I'm going to do is reduce its opacity from 30% to 10%. I'm also thinking that if the material was this badly scratched, the overall roughness would be quite a lot higher. So I'm going to go to the roughness setting in the main material, and I'm going to increase that to 20%. And with that done, let's fire preview off once more. So now things are looking a little bit better, but I still think these smaller scratches are showing up too strongly. So I'm going to now select the 3 roughness maps, and I'm going to reduce their opacity to 50%. I also think we could do with a little bit of color variation over the surface of this metal, because if this metal is old and slightly worn, I think it'd also be slightly burnished, and there would certainly be a less uniform color over its surface. So I'm going to go to the top of my material stack, and I'm going to add a noise layer. I'm going to set its effect to specular color. I'm going to go to the texture locator, and I'm going to set it to 0.5 meters, holding down Control. That will change it in all 3 axes. And then I'm going to go to my texture layers, and I'm going to set a sort of browny reddy color for my darker color. Let's do that. And I'm going to make sure the blend mode is set to multiply. With that done, let's unpause preview and have a look at the results. Now I can see that my new specular map is way too strong. It's turning my nickel orange. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce its opacity to 60% and fire off another test render. And this is certainly starting to look a lot better. Now the next thing I'd like to do would be to test the material under different lighting conditions, because you might be tempted to think that it still looks a little bit over bright and over clean. Well, this might be down to the fact that I'm working in the studio environment, which is designed specifically to be quite bright so you can see what's going on across the entire surface of your material. But if I restore my layout and test the lighting under different lighting conditions, we should see that it's going to look a lot more natural under more natural lighting setups. You can see that as I change the environment, it makes a profound difference to how the material is reacting. And we can see that under more natural lighting setups, some of the intense saturation and brightness of the material is starting to blend in more. And this is precisely why I created Uberball, because I found that using standard shadable scenes wasn't always a good indicator of how my materials were going to react when they were used in production scenes, because the lighting can change so dramatically, and that can have such a big influence on the material that I find it's really useful to have a range of environments that you can test your material in. So I think I'm happy with the material as it stands. So the next thing I'm going to do is to render out a thumbnail before I save the preset. So I'm going to go back to environment number 1, and I'm going to hit the F8 key and bring up my preview popover window. And I'm going to hit the play key, and then I'm going to hold down Control and hold down the lock. And that is going to give me a full resolution render at final render settings. So I'll just resize the window so that it fits at 100%. And I'm just going to let that cook. So now my thumbnail is rendered. I'm just going to save it to disk. So let's go to Save Image, and I'm going to call it Old Nickel. Write it as a JPEG. With that done, I can dismiss the preview window, and I need to do a little bit of cleanup. So let's select this redundant material in my material folder, and let's just delete that. And then once I've saved the main file, the next step will be to save the preset in a location my preset browser can access. So if you're not familiar with this, you can open preset browser by hitting F6, and you can use the add path command to add a custom path to your preset browser. So I've got this custom materials folder here, which I'm going to use. So I'm going to right click on my material, and I'm going to go save preset with thumbnail, and I'm going to call the preset Old Nickel. And next, Modo is going to ask me for the path to the thumbnail. So I'm going to find that. Here it is. And with that done, I should be able to open the preset browser by hitting F6, and it's going to take a few minutes to find the new preset because it's got to re-index the preset browser. So I'm just going to pause the video while this happens. So it's taken a minute or so for the preset browser to refresh and locate my new material, and you can see it's here. And now anytime I want to use it, I can simply drag it from the preset browser into the shader tree. So I hope you found this introduction to the workflow of Uberball useful. Thank you very much for watching.